I'm a backcountry ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains. If you've hiked out here, I might have walked past you without you ever knowing it was a job and not a vacation. I'm the guy you see a mile from the trailhead, muddy pants, radio on my shoulder, clipboard in my hand, trying to look friendly enough that you'll tell me where you're heading, and honest enough that you'll actually listen when I say, don't leave the trail. And I'm the guy you don't see when it goes wrong. When somebody doesn't come back to their car, that's me and a handful of other tired people out on the ridge at 2 a.m, sloshing through creek crossings with headlamps and bad coffee, trying to figure out if we're looking for a hiker or a body. We've got a lot of tools for that. Radios, maps, SAR protocols you can learn in a weekend course if you want the certificate, and little grey boxes screwed to trees, trail cameras. If you've ever noticed a metal box with a black glass eye about chest height on a trunk out here, congratulations, you've been on candid camera. We use Browning recon forces mostly, a couple Bushnells that never die and never work quite right, motion sensor, infrared flash. They trigger on heat and movement, bears, deer, hogs, people, poachers if we're lucky. Official line is wildlife monitoring. Unofficially, when someone vanishes, those cameras are the last eyes that saw them. That's where this starts, with a missing hiker and camera 3. It was late October, couple years back. You know that kind of day where the fog just sits in the hollows and refuses to burn off? Like the park doesn't feel like letting go of summer, but winter's already sneaking in around the edges. Cold enough you see your breath in the morning. Warm enough at noon, you regret the thermal base layer. I was on day 4 of a 6-day hitch. Mid-30s then, still thought my knees were going to last forever. I'd just finished a loop checking backcountry campsites up past Cosby when dispatch crackled in my ear. Backcountry, this is base. You clear? I hit my mic. Yeah, go ahead. Got a no-show at Trailhead 17. Solo male, mid-20s. Checked in yesterday for an overnight up Madron Bald. Car's still here. Family's calling every 10 minutes. Can you swing by on your way in? I checked my map, even though I didn't need to. Habit. Madron's not my favorite. Steep, rooty, lots of places to twist an ankle. But I was already halfway there. Yeah, I said. I can be at 17 in call it, 45. Copy that. SAR leads en route. Grab the cards on the way if you can. Cards, meaning SD cards, meaning the cameras. We've got a handful of them along that trail, mostly near junctions and unofficial campsites where we've had problems before. They're boring most days. Deer, raccoons, the occasional bear sniffing the lens. People with dogs they swear are leashed when they're not. I hiked out fast, the kind of pace where you can feel your shirt sticking between your shoulder blades under the pack. The air smelled like wet leaves and that sour, cold smoke you only get from a fire that wasn't put out right. I was already mentally drafting the lecture I'd give if this kid turned up hungover at campsite 29. Trailhead 17 was a mess when I got there. Family, like dispatch said, parents, an older sister, all pacing in tight little circles near the signboard. SAR leads truck, 2 volunteers in red jackets unloading gear. The missing guy's car, silver Subaru with 3 take only pictures, leave only footprints stickers on the back. Those always make me nervous. People with that many stickers think they're more prepared than they are. I talked to the family, got the basics, name, age, last known location. The dad had that brittle, angry calm some people get when they're hanging on by the last thread of normal. The mum kept looking past me up the trail like her kid was going to jog into view any second and apologize. He texted us a picture last night, the sister said, shoving her phone at me. Said he'd made camp and everything was good. I glanced at it. Standard backcountry flex, hammock strung between 2 poplars, little tarp, a grin that said he thought he'd figured out life. Dark behind him, too dark to see much else. Okay, I said. We're going to start with the obvious. I'll grab the cards from the cameras on the way up, see if we caught him on the trail. If he stayed en route, we'll have a window. I didn't say, If he stepped wrong near one of those drop-offs or decided to go off trail chasing a view, we'll have a window on that too. SAR lead. Tom, big guy, 10 more years on the job than me, clapped my shoulder. You take 3 and 4 on your way past. I'll radio you when we've got the grid set. Got it. Camera 3 is about a mile up from Trailhead 17, right where the trail does this sharp dogleg around a big rock outcrop and starts climbing in earnest. It watches a section where people like to cut the switchback and end up chewing up the hillside. I've told it more than once, it's a thankless job. I almost walked past it that day. Brain already in search mode, counting paces, checking for fresh prints in the mud. Then I saw the little grey box on the poplar and the tiny red LED winking like, "Don't forget me, asshole." "All right, 3, I muttered. "What have you got?" It was damp enough that my gloves squeaked on the plastic. I popped the latch, slid the SD card out with my thumb and forefinger. 32 gig, SanDisk, labelled Cam 3 in black Sharpie, with my own handwriting from last season, and dropped it into the little hard case on my belt. The case rattled when it closed, 7 or 8 other cards knocking around inside. I hit the test button, watched the screen flash awake, then close it up again. "You're fine," I told the camera. "You're always fine." I took cards from 4 and 5 on the way up. By the time we had a loose plan and started the hasty search, fog had rolled back in. It was one of those days where the trees just fade off into grey 100 feet away, like someone turned the draw distance down on the world. Fast forward a few hours. We didn't find him. Not that day. We found some boot prints, some scuffs where he'd slid on a wet route and caught himself. Nothing that screamed, "Fell off a cliff and died." No torn fabric, no blood, no dropped gear. Just absence. We called it at dark. That's a fun conversation to have with a family at a trailhead. We're not giving up, but we're not going to find your son in the dark with a half-exhausted crew and twisted ankles waiting to happen. You can feel them wanting you to transform into some kind of superhero and go anyway. I went back to the station with mud drying stiff on my pants and that metallic taste in my mouth. I always get after a long, useless search. My head hurt. My feet hurt. My brain hurt more. Trail cam review is usually a low-effort job. You sit at the old desktop in the back office, pop cards in, copy files, scan through thumbnails for anything obvious. Bears near camps, people where they shouldn't be. Most of it's just click, click, click. I slid the SD cards into a little pile next to the keyboard. Habit. They make this tiny sound when you tap them against your teeth. I caught myself doing that and stopped. No idea why it suddenly felt wrong. The office smelled like burnt coffee and wet wool. One fluorescent bulb was flickering with that faint insect zap sound. The wall clock ticked way too loud. I told myself I'd check 3, 4, and 5 for our hiker, then go shower, then sleep, in that order. Card from camera 3 went in first. The computer did its wheeze and grind startup noise when the folder opened. Hundreds of JPEGs, all with helpful names like cam3_1,234.jpg. I scrolled. Deer at dawn. A raccoon way too close to the lens. Empty frames where the wind had moved branches, making the sensor think Godzilla was coming. Then I saw him. The hiker. Bright blue rain jacket, the kind every REI catalogue is full of. Trekking poles, decent boots, brimmed hat. He looked like half the people we see out here. Over-prepared in some ways, underprepared in the ones that matter. First shot. He's coming up the trail, head down, poles angled like he's in a hurry. Timestamp. Yesterday, 15:18. Second shot. Closer to the camera, face visible. Young, dark hair, little moustache trying its best. 15:19. My stomach unclenched a little. At least we knew he'd made it that far. Then the next frame loaded. At first I thought the program had skipped ahead because the angle looked different. Trees, rock, the trail, same. But the hiker wasn't there. The trail was empty, and there was someone else in the shot. He was standing off to the right of the frame, about 30 yards back in the trees. Not on the trail, not even close to it, just there, half in shadow, facing sideways, like he was listening to something deeper in the forest. Brown canvas jacket, not a park uniform, not one of ours. Faded baseball cap pulled low, brim casting his face in shade. Hands at his sides. No backpack, no gear. No reason to be in that spot at that time of day. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. You learn to do that a lot with these things. Try to pick out details in the noise. The resolution's never as good as you want it to be. But this was clean. Too clean, almost. The lines on the jacket, the way his shoulders sloped, the angle of his head. The timestamp said 15:26, 8 minutes after the hiker passed. "Who the hell are you?" I said, out loud, to my empty office. The more I looked, the more it bothered me. There were no other footprints in the mud when we'd gone through there. Nothing that said second person. No mention from the family of him hiking with a buddy. The guy in the brown jacket wasn't on the shots from camera 4, just up trail. Or from 2, closer to the trailhead. Just this one frame. Maybe he'd come in from a side trail, I told myself. Maybe he'd bushwhacked over from an old logging road the tourists don't know about. Locals do that sometimes, trying to avoid the entry fees. We pick them up, give them a warning, move on. But there was something about the way he was standing. Too straight, too still. The trees behind him were fuzzed motion from wind, but he was sharp, crisp, like somebody had pasted him in there after the fact. I clicked to the next frame. Empty trail, no hiker, no man in the trees, just fog starting to thicken and the faint blur of a squirrel tail off to the left. I went back, stared at the shot with the man. My hand had started doing this little tremor thing on the mouse. Not full-on panic shaking, just enough that I noticed it. "Okay," I muttered. "Okay, random guy. Maybe he turned around. Maybe he stepped behind a tree. Not a big deal." I copied the files into the case folder, just like I always do. Then, I don't know why, I dragged that one image into a separate folder on my desktop and named it cam3_weird.jpg. If that was all that ever happened, I'd probably be laughing about it right now. Just another weird thing you see on the job story. Maybe I'd show it at a slideshow, get some jokes out of it. That was the first time I saw him, or the first time I noticed. I didn't think about the guy in the brown jacket much after that night. That sounds crazy now, but you have to understand how much noise there is in this job. Weird stuff gets buried fast. You've got fogged out lenses, bears chewing on cameras, teenagers mooning the trail, drunk campers dancing naked around fire pits at 2 a.m. One odd photo of a stranger in the trees doesn't exactly scream cosmic horror when you've still got a missing hiker and a family calling the station every couple of hours asking if there's news. We didn't find the kid that next day, or the next. After 72 hours, your odds get ugly, fast. I've sat in enough debriefs to know the numbers. Exposure, dehydration, a wrong step near a drop-off. This place doesn't have to be malevolent to kill you. It just has to be itself. They scaled the search down on day 4. We went from full SAR to limited continuing efforts, which is a nice way of saying, we'll keep an eye out, but we're not killing ourselves anymore. His car sat there another week before they towed it. That's a punch in the gut, watching a car go out of the lot without its owner. The case got its slot on the whiteboard. Name, age, date, trail, last known location. We wiped the rest of the board for the next round of people who thought the park was a safe place to test their limits and lose. Cam3 weird JPEG stayed in the little folder on my desktop. Every once in a while, I'd click it, just to make sure it was still as strange as I remembered. Brown jacket, baseball cap, standing 30 yards off the trail, shoulder angled like he's listening to somebody you can't see, hands hanging useless at his sides, no backpack. That part always bothered me. You don't go that far in without a pack, not if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you usually don't end up that deep in the trees. I told myself he was just some overconfident local, guy who thought he knew a secret route. Maybe he'd cut across to somebody's private land, go home, crack a beer, forget all about the kid who never came back to his Subaru. That was the story I went with anyway. A couple of weeks blurred past. Little River chewed out a section of trail and took half a footbridge with it. A black bear turned one of the horse camps into a shredded cooler graveyard. Some genius tried to hand feed a bull elk and went home with a hoofprint bruise the size of a dinner plate. The whiteboard in the duty office kept changing, fresh names going up, old ones getting wiped clean. That kid from Madron slid from active search to a dry line of ink and an empty parking space, and nobody said it out loud, but we'd all already filed him under the same word, gone. Then we got another call. This one came in on a Saturday afternoon, just as I was coming off a ridge patrol near Greenbrier. I was halfway back to my truck, boots full of Chili Creek water, thinking about how much I wanted a dry pair of socks and a microwave burrito, when the radio popped. Backcountry base. You up? I stopped, shifted my pack off one shoulder, thumbed the mic. Yeah, go ahead. Got a late checkout at Porter's Creek. 2 hikers, brothers, supposed to be back at 1400. Their mum's here. They're 3 hours overdue and no sign of them. I glanced at my watch. 17:06. Sun already starting to drop behind the ridge. I'm 20 minutes from the lot, I said. I'll swing by, see what we've got. Porter's is one of those easy trails on the brochure that turns ugly real fast if you don't respect it. Wide and mellow at first, then narrower, rooty, a couple creek crossings with rocks people like to slip off. In good weather with daylight, it's a nice walk. In fog and failing light, it'll chew you up. Trail cams wise, we've got 2 out there. One near the old farmstead where everybody takes pictures of the chimney. One farther up near a junction where the path splits toward a backcountry site. We'd had some issues with illegal camping up there, so the cameras pulled double duty, wildlife and idiots. By the time I bounced into the Porter's Creek lot, the mom was there with a minivan and that same wired, brittle look I'd seen at Trailhead 17. Tom's truck was there too, and one of the volunteers, Mia, leaning against her hood with her arms folded. Round 2, she said when I climbed out. You want the good news or the bad news? Good, I said. Always start with something you can hold on to. Both boys signed in properly. They told the ranger they were camping at campsite 31, not going off trail, had a map, had headlamps. And the bad news? I asked. Their car's still here and the map is on the passenger seat. I winced. Solid. We did the dance. Talked to the mom. She kept saying, they're good boys. They know what they're doing. Which is exactly the kind of thing people say right before you find out their good boys decided to free climb a wet rock face in trail runners. Tom started sketching out a hasty search. You got eyes on cameras? He asked me. Yeah. I'll grab the cards on the way, I said. If they stayed on the main trail, we should see them at least at the farmstead cam. He nodded, already mentally placing volunteers in grid patterns. Radio when you've got something. The hike in felt like deja vu. Different trail, same knot in my stomach. Fog again, not as thick as Madron that day, but enough to blur the far trees. The creek was loud from recent rain, talking over the whisper of leaves. Camera 1 on Porter's sits on a sycamore just before the old homestead, a shack and a chimney all the photographers love. I popped the case open, slid the SD card out. Cam 1 in my Sharpie, just like always. Come on, I muttered. Tell me they at least made it this far. Camera 2 is farther up, where the trail splits. One branch toward a waterfall, one toward the backcountry campsite. People miss the sign and go toward the falls when they shouldn't. We've hauled more than one hypothermic t-shirt-wearing genius out of that side. I grabbed its card too and stuck both into the hard case at my hip. You get used to the weight of those cases. That day, it felt heavier than usual. Back at the station, after the first sweep came up empty and they kept expanding the search area, I found myself once again in the back office with muddy pants, bad coffee, and a line of little plastic cards waiting to be judged. I told myself I was just doing my job. Pull the images, see if the brothers had got past camera 1, if they'd gone toward 31 or taken a wrong turn. No ghosts, no patterns, just data. I started with Porter's camera 1. Card in, folder opens, hundreds of photos again, dates and times marching down the screen. I scrolled until yesterday's date showed up. There they were. 2 guys, both mid-20s, similar faces. One taller with a scraggly beard, one clean-shaven. They were doing that goofy hiking photo pose, arms up, trekking poles like victory flags. Both of them smiling so wide you could almost hear the laughter. Timestamp, 13:22. Earlier than their planned camp time. Good. They'd made decent time. Next frame. Them walking past. Packs sitting right. Good posture. They looked prepared. Not like the flip-flop crowd. I kept going. I wanted to see them at camera 2. Wanted to be able to say, okay, they went left here, not right. I pulled the first Porter's 2 image up. The angle showed the junction, the post with the little brown sign pointing toward campsite 31. The light was different. Later in the day, shadows longer. 3rd frame in, there they were again, coming toward the junction. Looks like they're talking. Beard brother pointing at the sign. Clean-shaven one checking a map he clearly didn't plan on carrying. Timestamp, 14:03. Good, I murmured. You made it this far. I hit the arrow key for the next image. For a second, I thought I'd accidentally clicked back to the Madron folder. My chest did this weird little jump in place. Same trees? No. Different trail, different camera. But the shape in the background was identical. He was standing just off the junction, in the trees behind the campsite 31 sign. Same brown canvas jacket, same baseball cap, brim low, same sideways posture, like he was listening to somebody in the brush. Same distance from the lens. If you put a tape measure from the camera to his boots on both photos, I swear to you, it would have read out the same number. This time there were no hikers in the frame. The brothers had already passed through. The trail was empty. Just the sign, the split, the wet leaves, and him. My hand found my mouth. I don't remember telling it to. I sat like that for a heartbeat. 2, just staring. The timestamp said 14:11. On Madron, the shot of the kid and the shot of the man were 8 minutes apart. On Porter's, same deal. Roughly. That shouldn't have meant anything. Different day, different trail, different cameras. People hike in brown jackets all the time. People stand in the woods all the time. My brain was grabbing at coincidences like a drowning man grabs at anything that floats. Okay, I said, out loud, to nobody. Okay, slow down. I leaned in, studying him. Trees were different, sure. But the drape of the jacket? Same creases. One big diagonal fold across the chest, like the fabric had been caught on something once and never forgiven it. The cap brim shading his face the exact same way, even the way his right shoulder dipped half an inch lower than his left. Could be the same guy, I told myself. Just weird luck. Maybe he's a hunter, I muttered. Or some local who likes to screw with us. Maybe he knows where the cameras are. Except hunters out here wear blaze orange in season, and nobody with sense loiters 8 minutes behind hikers near a junction when they're trying to avoid being seen. I flipped back to the Madron photo, opened it beside the Porter's one. 2 windows on the same old CRT monitor, humming faintly, the room suddenly feeling 10 degrees colder. If you'd asked me to tell you which was which without looking at the background, I don't know that I could have done it. Same clothes, same posture, same faceless, unremarkable, not quite visible expression. The only real difference was the trees. I don't like that it took me as long as it did to stop trying to rationalize it. That's one of my mistakes. I sat there for maybe half an hour, going back and forth between them, zooming in, zooming out, convincing myself I was making patterns where none existed because I was tired and we had another missing persons board starting to fill. It was the timestamps that finally got me. Madron, 1526, standing off the trail. Porters, 1411, standing off the junction. Those trails aren't close. You'd have to drive 30, 40 minutes between those trailheads, and that's if you ignore the fact that the first one was 2 weeks before the second. I wasn't asking myself whether he could physically travel between them. That came later. What hit me then was this stupid, tiny detail. In both images, he was the exact same number of frames into the sequence after the hikers passed. Madron. Hiker leaves frame. 3 empty shots. Then him. Porters. Brothers leave frame. 3 empty shots. Then him. That's a stupid thing to fixate on, I know. It's the kind of thing that makes you sound insane. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. Same unknown man, same clothes, same pose, same distance, same 3 shots later. Could be nothing, I told myself. Could be the camera buffering weird. Could be some software quirk. Or he knew exactly how our cameras worked. That thought slid in the back door of my mind and just sat there. I did the thing I absolutely should not have done if I wanted to sleep that night. I dragged the porter's image into the same folder as Cam 3_weird, renamed it Cam 2_weird, stared at the 2 little thumbnail icons side by side, identical pale smudges in different forests. Protocol says you log everything, put it all in the main case folder, make sure everyone on the team can see it if they need to. Trail cams are park property, evidence in any investigation. We don't squirrel things away on personal drives. I highlighted both weird files and copied them onto a cheap little USB stick I kept in the top drawer. Red plastic, chipped at one corner. We used it for training slideshows sometimes. I'd cleared it out the week before. I stuck the USB in my pocket, feeling the hard little rectangle press into my thigh when I sat back down. Then I deleted the weird copies from my desktop and my personal folder, left the originals where they were supposed to be, buried inside the huge case directories, one odd frame among thousands. Don't be that guy, I told myself again. Don't start a ghost folder on the work computer. I was sweating, I realized. Just a little, along the hairline. My mouth was dry. Random guy, I told myself. Same jacket, same build, same stupid habit of lurking just off trail. Maybe he lives up here. Maybe I've passed him 100 times and never noticed. Maybe. I shut the monitor off. The office went instantly darker. The fluorescent flicker seemed louder without the screen glow. Behind me, I heard the soft whir of the ceiling camera recentering itself. Just normal calibration. Just a motor doing what it's supposed to. Still, I could feel it. That weight between my shoulder blades. Like the little black dome in the ceiling, and something in those photos were both looking at the same person. Me. That night was the second time I saw him. The second time I noticed anyway. If I'd had any sense, that second photo would have been the point where I went to my supervisor and said, "Hey, I think we've got somebody screwing with the cameras." Put it on the record. Make it everybody's problem, not just mine. Instead, I did what I always do when something doesn't fit my picture of how the world works. I tried to make it fit. 2 different trails, 2 different days. Same guy in a brown jacket, standing just off the path, like he's waiting for someone who never arrives. I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. Local who hates the park and likes messing with us. Some idiot with a good memory for camera placements. Hell, maybe it was one of the seasonal rangers being a jackass, seeing how long it would take me to notice. I slept like shit that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those two images overlaying each other, the forest flickering back and forth around a man who didn't change. Next morning I came in early, still half damp from the shower, hair doing that thing where it won't lie flat. The station smelled the way it always does at 7 a.m. Stale coffee, pine sol, the faint damp funk of wet gear. Tom was at the table with a styrofoam cup, staring at the incident board. "Morning," he grunted. "Hey." I poured myself coffee that had clearly been on the burner since the Nixon administration, sat down across from him. He jabbed his chin toward the whiteboard. "Brothers are still out there. Team's going back up Porters at 9. "Yeah," I said. I could feel the USB drive in my pocket, like it weighed 5 pounds instead of a few grams. I saw them on camera 1 and 2 yesterday." "And?" he asked. That one syllable carries a lot coming from him. 10 years more experience, seen more bodies than I have fingers. "And they looked fine," I said. "No limping, no arguing. Packs looked right. They went toward 31. Didn't see him coming back down." Tom rubbed his jaw. "So they either never made camp, or something happened between the junction and the site." "Yeah," I said again. I almost left it there. Almost let the conversation move on to weather patterns and search grids. But that brown jacket was sitting in my head like a stone. "Something else, though," I heard myself say. Tom glanced up. "What kind of something else?" I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup so he wouldn't see them fidgeting. "There's a guy on Porters 2, after they pass, standing off the junction. I saw him on Madron too, couple weeks back. Same jacket. Looks like the same guy." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Poacher?" "That's what I was thinking," I lied, because maybe reality is bending didn't seem like a good opener. "Or some local who knows where we've got the cams and thinks it's funny." "You see his face?" Tom asked. "Not really. Cap's low. He's far enough back it's kinda grainy." "You get a shot on any other cameras?" I shook my head. "Just Madron 3 and Porters 2. Both times he's just standing there." Tom sipped his coffee, made a face. "We've had worse. Remember the guy who kept leaving deer guts under the cams?" "Yeah, fun times." He thought about it a minute. You could see him running the possibilities through his mental filing cabinet. Trespasser, hunter, maybe just some creep watching hikers. "All right," he said finally. "Here's what we'll do. After the morning sweep, we'll swing by that junction, see if there's any sign of where he came in or out. Might be some boot prints, cigarette butts, something. You got prints of the stills?" "Not yet," I said. "I can make some." "Do that. Bring 'em. If he's walking around the park like he owns the place, I want to look at him." He said it like a challenge, like whoever this was had picked a fight with the wrong forest. I told myself that's all this was. Just a safety check, due diligence, guy in a weird place on 2 different cameras. That's enough to justify a look without sounding like you believe in ghosts. The printer in the office sounded like it was dying as it spit out the shots. Black and white, cheap ink, half-tones turning the forest into mushy grey. The man in the brown jacket didn't look any less strange for being on paper. If anything, he looked more wrong, flattened like that, frozen mid-listen. I stuck the photos in a plastic sleeve and clipped them to my clipboard. By 9, I was on the trail again with Tom and Mia. Mia's one of our volunteer SAR folks, mid-20s, all wiry energy and nervous jokes when she's not tired. That morning, she didn't joke much. The board was starting to look like a trend instead of a fluke. We moved fast, conserving breath, boots whispering over damp leaves. The light under the canopy was that soft, directionless grey you get when the sky can't decide if it's going to clear or spit rain. The creek muttered beside us. "You think they just slept in and took a long way down?" Mia asked at one point, voice thin. I think if they're just sleeping in, they're going to be very embarrassed at how many people are about to be mad at them, I said. But I'd take embarrassment over the alternatives. Truth was, I wasn't feeling optimistic. You do enough of these, and you develop a sense for when a situation has gone sideways. This had that stink on it. We hit Porter's camera 1, kept moving. The junction came into view like a stage set. Signpost, 2 paths diverging, blanket of wet leaves. No obvious prints to the naked eye, but the surface was pretty chewed from the last few days. I stopped by the tree where camera 2 was mounted. Old hemlock, bark furrowed like wrinkles. The little grey box was strapped on with a nylon belt. It looked off. "That's weird," I said. "What?" Tom asked. I put a hand on the camera and nudged it. It wobbled more than it should have. The belt was slightly loose, and the angle was wrong, tilted just a touch downwards, like someone taller than me had bumped it with a shoulder and not bothered to straighten it. "I tightened this last week," I said. "It shouldn't be pointing at the ground." Mia came over. "Maybe a bear scratched on the tree." "Could be," I said. "We do get bears rubbing on whatever they feel like. But there'd usually be hair or claw marks, and they don't usually move the camera just enough that it still works." I thumbed the latch, slid the SD card out, dropped it into my case. The camera's tiny screen lit when I tapped the test button, showing a little slice of the junction, slightly skewed. The sign in frame, part of the trail, a lot of leaf litter. I looked where the man had been standing in the photo. It was just trees now, a tangle of rhododendron and saplings and moss-soft rocks. Nothing special. But standing there, looking, I got this strange sensation that the trees were remembering. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you how it felt. "You're sure about this guy?" Tom asked behind me. "Yeah," I said. I pulled out the plastic sleeve and showed him. First photo, Porter's. Second, Madron. Same jacket, same brim, same nothing face. He studied them for a long, quiet moment. "Could be the same guy," he said. "We get repeat offenders. Maybe he likes to people watch." "Maybe," I said. "He's not in any of the shots between though. It's just hikers, then 3 empty frames, then him, then nothing." "You think he's involved?" Mia asked. "With the missing ones, I mean." I watched the trees while she spoke. I wanted to see a branch move, a flash of brown canvas, something. Instead, everything seemed to hold its breath. "I don't know yet," I said. "But if he is, he's bold, standing that close to the junction." Tom grunted. "If he's behind this, we'll find him. If he's not, he'll turn up eventually, being weird somewhere else." We didn't find any tracks that screamed mystery man. The ground was a mess of tread patterns, paw prints, hoof marks, erosion. After a while, every mark starts to look like a clue if you stare hard enough. You can lose yourself in false trails that way. We had 2 actual missing people to focus on, so we didn't stay long. We split up for the search, Tom and Mia taking a sweep toward 31, me looping along a side drainage where people sometimes decide to cut a shortcut and end up exhausted and lost. Radio checks on the half hour, standard stuff. I wish I could tell you something dramatic happened out there. Voices in the fog, strange footprints, a glimpse of brown between the trees. It wasn't like that. It was just hours of wet boots and the sound of my own breathing, my mind halfway on grid patterns and halfway on those photos. We didn't find the brothers that day either. By the time we called it again, my legs felt like someone had swapped them for someone else's and not told me. I made it back to the station on autopilot. The parking lot lights had kicked on, bathing the trucks and SUVs in that sickly sodium orange. My truck sat in its usual spot under the one light that always buzzed. Inside, the mood was about what you'd expect. Tired voices, quiet swearing, the soft clack of a keyboard as someone updated the incident report. I dropped my pack by the bench, unbuckled my radio harness, started peeling off my damp outer layer. felt the little USB drive shift in my pocket as I bent. I was halfway to the showers when one of the newer rangers, Kyle, stuck his head out of the duty office. "Hey," he said. "You're good with the cams, right?" "Depends," I said. "Did you break one?" He grimaced. "No, just the lot cam's being weird. Keeps triggering on nothing. I cleared the spiders off, but it still fills the folder with junk. I was going to delete everything, but since you're here..." "Yeah, all right," I sighed. "Let me take a look." We've got a handful of cameras pointed at the station itself. One on the front door, one on the equipment shed, one on the lot. Technically, they're more security than wildlife, but the interface is the same. The lot cam feeds into a separate computer in the duty office. Newer machine, but the same old clicking mouse. Kyle seeded the chair. I sat, cracked my knuckles, trying not to drip sweat on the keyboard. The UI showed a big, ugly list of files from the last 24 hours. Lotcam 0312 something something. The motion sensor out there is finicky. You get a lot of empty frames. Wind, rain, moths, the occasional raccoon investigating trash cans. "You want to just nuke the obvious blanks?" Kyle asked. "Yeah, hang on." I started flipping through them at speed. Empty lot, empty lot. Deputy's car, empty lot. A stray dog wandering through. Me walking to my truck that morning, coffee in one hand, pack slung over the other shoulder. The sameness of it was almost soothing, ordinary, boring. I could feel the search days starting to peel off me, layer by layer. Then another frame came up and my hand stopped. "Did you see something?" Kyle asked. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Yeah, I did." The lot was mostly empty in this shot. One volunteer's Subaru near the far edge. My truck closer to the building. White Ranger. Mud splashed up the sides. The sky was dark. The timestamp put it at just after 2 a.m. that morning, sometime before the storm rolled in fully. He was standing behind my truck. Not directly behind it, more like just off the passenger side, at the edge of the lamplight. Same brown canvas jacket, same cap, same sideways profile, turned slightly like he was listening for something beyond the tree line across the road. He hadn't been there in the previous frame. That one was just my truck and the Subaru. Dirty snow of pixel noise, nothing else. 3 empty shots, and then this one. Then nothing in the one after. I zoomed in until the pixels got big enough to count. The resolution wasn't as good as the trail cams, but it was still clear enough. That fold in the jacket, the diagonal crease across the chest, was there. The cap brim cut the same shadow. Hands at his sides, fingers hidden by the cuffs. "You know that guy?" Kyle asked, leaning in. My tongue felt like it had glued itself to the roof of my mouth. I swallowed, tasted old coffee and adrenaline. "No," I said. "No, I don't." He frowned. "Probably some random who pulled in and then left. We didn't have any visitors overnight though, at least not in the log." He didn't sound concerned. Why would he? To him it was just some dude who'd walked through the lot when nobody was looking. The world is full of some dudes. We just don't usually catch them in triplicate on 3 different cameras on 3 different days, never moving, never changing. I flipped back 1 frame. Empty lot. Forward again. Brown jacket. I checked the timestamp, 2:13. That was about the time I'd given up on sleep, made myself a cup of terrible instant noodles, and sat at my kitchen table scrolling aimlessly through my phone. I lived 10 minutes down the road. If I'd looked out my window at the right angle, I could have seen the glow from that lot light. "You want to flag it?" Kyle asked. Could be nothing. Could be nothing. I thought about saying, "Yeah, mark it," bringing Tom in, starting the whole process. But the part of me that hates being wrong, that hates sounding like the crazy one, was louder. "Just leave it for now," I said. "If it's the same guy from the trail cams, he's trespassing. I'll pull stills later and compare." "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "Go grab your shower. I'll deal with it." He shrugged and left. already mentally washing off the day. I stared at the screen a long time, feeling the air in the duty office go thick and stale. The ceiling camera in here doesn't move, it's fixed, pointing at the desk. Still, I had that same sensation as in the back office, like two lenses were pointed at the same point in space, and that point happened to be me. Without really thinking about it, I reached into my pocket and touched the USB drive. Tiny rectangle of plastic and metal, 2 forest images of a man who shouldn't match. Now, I guess. 3. Trail 3. Porters. 2. Lot cam. Same man, different camera. No one's ever seen him in person. Not yet, anyway. Chapter 4. The lot cam shot should have been my line in the sand. Trail cam weirdness is one thing. That's out there, in the trees, where your brain is already primed for stories. Seeing that same brown jacket behind my truck at 2 in the morning, under the sodium lamp in our own parking lot, that was different. That was home base. Instead of saying, okay, this has gone far enough, I'm telling everyone, I did what I always do. I told myself I'd wait until I had something solid. I saved the frame from the lot cam, dragged it into the same hidden folder where I'd stuck the Madron and Porter's shots. lot_weird.jpg. 3 little icons now, 3 different backgrounds, 1 identical man. Then I sat there at the desk long after my shift technically ended, staring at the list of files and feeling that stupid little plastic USB drive like a splinter in my pocket. You ever get a thought that just loops? For me, it was this. If he's a real person, there should be more of him. More photos, more angles, more days. People don't exist as 3 still frames. They leave tracks, tickets, complaints, paperwork. If I could find him being boring, buying a day pass at the front gate, walking past a store camera downtown, getting a speeding ticket, then I could stop thinking about the other possibility, the one where the world works differently than I want it to. So that night, after I finally went home, showered, lay down, and stared at the ceiling for an hour, I got back up, made coffee, and drove back to the station. No one said anything when I came in. We've always got someone on, but night duty doesn't ask many questions if you look like you're there on purpose. I nodded at whoever was at the front desk, mumbled something about paperwork, and headed straight for the back. Our archive room isn't some high-tech bunker. It's a repurposed storage closet with metal shelves and a crappy AC unit that works 3 days out of 5. Boxes of old incident reports, binders of trails maintenance logs, a couple plastic crates full of busted radios. Someone keeps saying they're going to fix when there's time. The trail cam backups live on 2 battered external drives and a little stack of DVDs in a milk crate. Somebody had tried to label them neatly: Trail Cam 2019, Trail Cam 2020 Q1, Mad Miscellaneous. But over the years, different handwriting had crept in, Sharpie colors changed, and the system turned into more of a suggestion than a rule. I found the latest drives easy. The older ones took a little digging. Dust puffed up when I shifted boxes. My headlamp beam caught the edge of an old 3-ring binder, the spine cracked and stained. Camera anomalies, Backcountry, it said, in block letters. I hesitated with my hand on it, the way you do when you find someone else's journal. Then I pulled it out and flipped it open. First few pages were boring. Printouts from early digital cams, notes about false triggers, nighttime IR washouts, hardware failures. Then some shot of a bear nose up close, a note beneath in loopy handwriting. Cam 5, chewed again, replace strap. The handwriting wasn't mine, not Tom's either. The name at the bottom of the first page read, Ranger Hargrove. Hargrove. I knew the name. I'd never worked with him. He'd left the park just before I started, but his initials were still on some waypoints in the GPS, and every once in a while someone would mention him in that half-amused, half-fond way people talk about ex-co-workers. Guy was obsessed with cameras, Tom had said once. Knew every model, Every sensor quirk. Used to give these little lectures about digital witnesses if you let him. I turned a page. A sequence of 3 printed trail cam stills on an alum cave access road, dated 5-6 years back. First, empty track. Second, a pickup parked where it shouldn't be. Third, 2 men hauling a deer carcass into the bed. Notes about illegal hunting, citations issued, case closed. Next page, more poachers. Next, someone dumping trash. Hargrove had highlighted faces with a yellow marker in a couple shots. Wrote same guy in the margin. Just normal law enforcement salmon fishing. I flipped ahead. Near the back, the format started to wobble. Still photos, sure, but the notes got stranger. Unsubject male present in multiple sites. See also cam 7, 9, 11, one page said. No pictures attached, just a list of file names and dates. The handwriting was tighter now, cramped. On another page, he'd underlined a line 3 times. Pose identical. The last entry in the binder was just a date, a camera number, and 3 question marks. No more pages after that. According to the little date stamp at the bottom, that last entry was made about 8 months before I ever put on a Smokies uniform. The binder had been shoved on a shelf and apparently forgotten. I closed it. The room felt smaller. If it was the same thing I was seeing, Hargrove had been sniffing at it years ago. And then, for whatever reason, he'd stopped. Retired, burned out, transferred, something. People leave this job. The park stays. The drive sat in the crate, humming quietly in my imagination. I picked out one marked Trail Cam 2018 and carried it back to the main office like evidence. The old desktop in the back office whirred awake when I plugged it in. The familiar buzz of the fluorescent overhead flickered to life. It was just me, the chair, the computer, the wall clock ticking too loud, and the black dome camera in the corner of the ceiling, its glass eye reflecting a tiny point of light. I told myself I was just looking for closure. Either I'd find the guy all over the place and be reassured, just some weirdo with a favorite jacket and too much free time, or I'd find nothing and be forced to admit I was chasing patterns in noise. I opened the drive. It was like staring at an ocean of file names. One folder from a late fall about 10 years back finally made me stop scrolling. 2 trail cam shots from the same night, same clearing, maybe 20 seconds apart. First frame, empty track, leaves matted down from old boot traffic, that flat grey IR wash. Second frame, a pickup nosed just into the edge of the beam, driver's door hanging open, cab empty. In the far corner of the frame, where the brush should have just been a smear, there was a man in that same dark jacket, turned half away, one hand on the truck bed like he'd been there the whole time, and the camera had only now remembered to include him. No follow-up report, no tow record, no recovered vehicle in the file. The ranger's notes ended on 3 words. Owner never found. Folders nested inside folders. By year, by camera, by trail. Cam 3, Cam 4, Cam 7, Cam 12. Madron, Alum, Deep Creek, Ramsey. Thousands upon thousands of JPEGs, each one a little rectangle of frozen time. Start simple, I told myself. Start where you've already seen him. I pulled up the folder for Madron Bald, Camera 3 from last year. Same angle of trail, same rock outcrop. Summer this time, not fall. Leaves bright green, light harsher. Deer, raccoons, hikers in shorts and sun hats. I flipped quickly through a week's worth of images, watching the tiny preview bar blur into a flipbook. On day 4, frame 121, I stopped. He was standing off the trail, in the trees. Same spot where the missing hiker would be months later. Brown jacket, cap, shoulder turned. The timestamp said 19th of June, 2018, 9:46 a.m. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, made myself go find the next images. Nothing before, nothing after. Just him, and then empty frames. Okay, I thought. So maybe he's just some guy who uses Madron like his personal hangout. Same jacket for at least a year. That's not weird. I've got shirts older than some of our summer temps. Maybe he works nearby. Maybe he cuts across the ridge. I pulled up Porter's, camera 2, same year, same junction, same sign. Winter now. Snow dusting the leaves, ice on the creek. Fewer hikers in chipper shorts, more in layered jackets, hands tucked in pockets. On an afternoon in January, there he was. Behind the campsite 31 sign again, a faint ghost in the trees you'd miss if you weren't looking. Same posture, same distance, no visible breath, even though the hikers in the foreground of the previous frame had puffs of white coming out of their mouths. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't noticed. Okay, I whispered. Okay, okay. I started jumping trails at random. The system didn't like it. Every time I asked it to load a new year, it took a minute, whirring like an old man getting off the couch. I didn't care. Cades Cove, Big Creek Access, Klingman's Dome Spur, Laurel Falls, trails I'd walked 100 times. He wasn't in every folder. That somehow made it worse. I'd go through weeks that were just normal, foxes at night, tourists doing peace signs, a bear scratching its back on a tree close enough to the lens that you could see the coarse black hair. Then, suddenly, in one otherwise boring week, same man, brown canvas jacket, cap low. Sometimes there were people in the frame with him, a few moments earlier. Sometimes there weren't. He was never looking at the camera, never moving, always just far enough away that you couldn't make out his face, and always by himself. I realized after a while that I wasn't really breathing right. I was taking these shallow, top-of-the-chest sips, while my eyes scanned for that one shape. The ceiling camera in the corner had stopped being background by then. I could feel it. Fixed in place, sure, but the knowledge of it, of that glass dome, made the back of my neck itch. I told myself this was good news. If he was in all these shots, then he was real. No ghost, no demon, just some asshole haunting the park with a jacket that never wore out. Maybe he was stalking people. Maybe he'd hurt somebody. But at least that was a category I understood. We have procedures for individuals. That's what I kept repeating while I dug. It was when I switched from random browsing to looking at specific incidents that things went sideways. We keep interesting photos in a separate training folder, stuff we use for presentations. Here's what an illegal fire looks like on cam. Here's what a bear looks like right before it decides your cooler is its business. There's one shot I'd used maybe half a dozen times in talks with volunteers and new rangers. I knew that image. I'd stared at it while talking enough that I could picture it with my eyes closed. Family on a footbridge up near Deep Creek. You've got the classic composition. Dad in front, holding a little girl's hand. Mom a few steps behind with a day pack and a "how much further" expression. The bridge has a handrail on one side, a drop on the other, down to a pretty little cascade. In the slideshow, I use it to talk about why we put certain cameras where we do. See the hand, I always say. If that little girl trips and goes over, the dad doesn't have a lot of time to react. That camera lets us see how many kids are out there in sneakers and no jackets, so we can decide if we need extra patrols. I pulled up the training folder, found the file. Deep Creek _bridge_01.jpg. I clicked it. Family on bridge. Dad, little girl, mum, hand on rail, cascade in the background, and behind them, in the trees on the far bank, 30 yards back, half hidden by a laurel bush and a deadfall log. Brown jacket, just a sliver of him, shoulder, cap brim, a hint of torso. enough for my brain to fill in the rest to match the other images I'd seen. Same angle, same distance from the lens if you measured straight across the creek. I sat very, very still. The office hum fell away. All I could hear was the clock. I knew that photo. I knew it. I had never, in any of the times I'd used it in front of people, seen that jacket in the background. You can tell yourself you missed something once, maybe twice, but there are limits to the lies you can swallow. I would have noticed a man standing in the trees in a shot I'd used as an example of just this family on a bridge. I would have made a joke about it, turned it into a teaching point about situational awareness. I hadn't. I dug out the thumb drive again. My hands were shaking enough that I dropped it twice before I got the cap off. I copied the Deep Creek photo, stuck it next to the others. 4 weird files now, lined up like mugshots. Then I remembered something. The training poster. We've got a corkboard in the main hallway where we pin up visitor safety crap. Bears, ticks, hydration, all the greatest hits. Last spring, one of the interns had printed a few of our standard slideshow images and turned them into a makeshift poster. Bright yellow title block, "Enjoy the park, but stay aware," and a handful of photos under it, including the Deep Creek bridge shot. I'd walked past that thing 100 times without really seeing it, the way you stop seeing anything you hang on a wall. I left the office and went down the hall. My boots felt too loud on the tiles. The building was quiet, just that late-night hum of old air ducts and the occasional creak as it inhaled and exhaled. The poster was where I remembered, right between the bulletin about a volunteer potluck and a sun-faded flyer from 2 summers ago about invasive plants. The bridge photo was in the top right corner, taped slightly crooked. Dad, little girl, Mom, same poses, same expressions, the hand on the rail. And behind them, in the trees on the far bank, brown jacket, same shoulder, same cap brim, same sliver of torso. I just stared at it, one hand on the corkboard, until my fingers started to hurt from pressing. Paper doesn't update. That's not how anything works. If files glitch, if servers hiccup, if my memory decides to play tricks, fine, I can almost live with that. But ink on paper is ink on paper. Except there he was. A stupid little part of me wanted to tear it down, rip the whole board off the wall and throw it in the dumpster out back. But there were cameras in the hallway too, little black domes staring down, and I had this sudden, crawling sense that being seen reacting would be worse than pretending nothing was wrong. I let go of the corkboard, listened to the pushpins creak back into place. Back in the office, I sat down again, closed the training folder, and stared at the blank desktop. The USB drive in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole in my leg. 4 images now, from different years, different trails, different contexts. A man who shouldn't be consistent. A background element that hadn't been there, now just was. I looked up at the ceiling camera. "They can't all be wrong," I said softly. "You can't all be wrong." If he was in old footage now, he could have been in any old footage. Every camera, every year, every missing case, every selfie some tourist took on a trail with a little black box up in a tree behind them, watching. It hit me then how big the problem might be. This wasn't just about the last few weeks. It wasn't even about the Smokies, necessarily. These cameras are everywhere. National parks, state forests, hunting leases, backyards, parking lots, gas stations. If he could show up in hours whenever he wanted, if he could slide into archived frames like dust under a door, then there wasn't really a before to hide in. No period you could point to and say, that's when it started. He'd been standing in the trees behind a family on a bridge for who knows how long before I noticed. And now, I couldn't stop seeing him. By the time the lot cam got him, I'd already seen enough to know this wasn't just some guy in a jacket. Old footage, new footage, Bridge posters that shouldn't have changed but did. Hargrove's binder with unsub mail scribbled in the margins like a warning no one took seriously. It all stacked up into something I didn't have a box for. I still tried to find one. Stalker, I told myself. Creep. Maybe something wrong with him. Maybe he lives out here in some tin roof shack the maps don't show. It was easier to believe in a dangerous man than in whatever it was my gut was whispering. The park didn't slow down just because I was unraveling. People still got lost. Trails still washed out. Black bears still flipped coolers like they were auditioning for a strongman contest. You don't get to step off the world just because you've seen something that doesn't make sense. About a week after the lot cam shot, we had a run of quiet days. No fresh missing persons, no heavy storms. The kind of lull that should have felt like a gift. Instead, I used it to go fishing in the cameras. We've got one cam up past Cades Cove I've always liked. Cam 9 on the database. I call it 9 like it's a coworker. It's strapped to an oak overlooking a little game trail that cuts between two clearings. Deer love that spot. Bears come through sometimes. Hogs once in a while. On a normal week, 9 fills cards like a slot machine paying out. Hundreds of clips of movement at all hours. It's also near where I brought Hargrove's name up once, and Tom just said, "Yeah, he burned out," and changed the subject. So when the lull hit, I signed out a truck, grabbed a pocket full of fresh SD cards, and told whoever was on duty I was going to swap a few cams before the weekend rush. Cades Cove was in that in-between state when I got there. Summer crowds thinning, leaves just starting to yellow. The air had that smell I only ever get in the shoulder seasons. Damp grass, old wood, a hint of cold waiting its turn. I parked at the service gate, let myself in, cut across a field that would have had tourists all over it an hour later. Grass slick with dew soaked my pants up to the knees. My boots made that soft, sucking sound in the low spots. The closer I got to 9's tree line, the quieter it got. You get used to the baseline noise, cicadas, crickets, birds, the occasional squirrel throwing a tantrum. That morning, as I stepped into the shade of the oaks, the sound just thinned, not gone, not cinematic silence, just like a radio station fading out as you drive away from town. Enough that I noticed, not enough that I could point to and say, "There, that's wrong." "Hey 9, I said under my breath, because I talk to cameras when I'm alone. "You behaving?" The little grey box was where it always was, about chest height on the oak. Webs stretched between it and the bark, glinting in the weak light. Usually I clear those with a stick, so we don't end up with 10,000 photos of one enthusiastic spider. Today, I didn't have to. The webs were old, dusty, nothing fresh. The strap was still tight. No claw marks, no mud, no bear hair. Just a camera, pointed at a game trail only deer and bored rangers normally care about. I popped the latch, took the card out, slid it into the hard case on my belt. The case felt weirdly light. I realized I'd been expecting it to be heavier, like whatever was on that card had a physical weight. I hit the test button. The little screen blinked online, showed me a grainy version of the clearing. Everything looked normal. "Good," I said, and I think I even meant it in that moment. On the way back, I swapped a couple more cams, called in a quick status update. The radio hissed and crackled and did what it was supposed to. The drive back to the station should have been forgettable. Trees, road, the usual. But the whole time, I had that feeling you get when you know you've missed something. Like leaving the house and knowing you forgot your keys, but not being able to remember locking the door. The back office felt smaller than usual when I sat down again. Same old chair, same battered desktop, same wall clock ticking like a dog's toenails on tile. The ceiling camera's black dome watched the top of my head. I slotted 9's card into the reader, opened the folder. Nothing looked off at first. Just the usual flood of images, file names marching down the screen. I started from the end. That morning's date. You learn to work backwards in this job. Whatever's freshest is usually most relevant. First frame, empty clearing in early light, mist low to the ground, a rabbit in the far corner, frozen mid-hop. Next, doe nosing at the edge of the frame. Next, doe and fawn. Next, empty. It went like that for a while. Deer, raccoons, occasional strings of empty frames when the sensor got jumpy. I noticed after a bit that the last couple days were sparse. Less movement than there should have been. Maybe heat, maybe something else. I scrolled back 3 nights. That's when I saw him. Not a nice gradual sighting either. Just empty frame, and then there he was, like somebody had pasted him into the woods as a joke. Brown canvas jacket, cap, standing at the edge of the game trail, a little further back than the deer usually came. Maybe 35 yards. Enough that he was smaller in the frame, but unmistakable once your brain knew what to look for. He was sideways again. Same damn pose, shoulder angled like he was listening to somebody deeper in the trees, hands hanging at his sides. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. "Of course," I muttered. "Of course you're here too." I checked the timestamp. 2:41, middle of the night. No hikers, no tours, no legitimate reason for a human to be standing in that exact spot under that old oak at that hour, unless you count trying to get eaten by a bear as a reason. I hit the arrow key. Next frame. Still him, same place. Maybe a hair clearer. Sensor stepped down the exposure, caught a little more detail. Another click. He was closer. Not by much. Maybe 5, 6 feet. Enough that I could tell. Same pose, same jacket. Just a little larger in the frame, a little more forward on the game trail. Every line of him crisp, while the background had that gentle motion blur you get when branches move in a breeze. If this had been any other sequence, I would have written it off as a trick of the angle. Camera shake, wind, something. But the cam's screwed to a tree. It doesn't move between frames unless something smacks it, and there was no change in the framing of the background. No new tree, no shifted rock. The only thing that changed between those 2 shots was him. Another click, closer again. He was maybe halfway between his original position and the camera now, still sideways. Still that same unnatural stillness. The jacket's folds didn't shift. The brim of the cap cut the same shadow over his face. My finger hovered over the key for a long second. I didn't want to see the next one. I hit it anyway. He was standing almost dead center in the frame now, maybe 10 yards out, closer than I'd ever seen him. The trail behind him curved out of sight. In the dim IR wash, his clothes looked almost black. Details on his face turned into a smear where the sensor couldn't quite decide what to do. And he wasn't sideways anymore. He was turned toward the camera. It wasn't dramatic. No horror movie snap of the head, no contorted limbs. Just his shoulders squared up, his head facing straight down the barrel of the lens, like he'd been listening to something in the trees, and now he was listening to me. There's something wrong about a still image that feels like it's making eye contact. I couldn't see his eyes, not really. The IR flattened everything out. But I knew, looking at that grainy mess, that if there had been color, his gaze would have been locked directly where mine was. I realized I'd rolled my chair back from the desk without meaning to. I was halfway to the door, spine pressed into the backrest, fingers clenched so tight on the armrests that my knuckles ached. "Jesus Christ," I breathed. My throat felt tight. I forced myself to roll back in. The mouse felt slick under my hand. I told myself I was just going to check the timestamp, not stare. 2:47. There was a gap between each frame. 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, then this one. Some part of my brain started doing the math on how fast he'd have to be moving. Another part hissed that it didn't matter. I hit the key again. The next image didn't load right. The progress bar at the bottom did its little blue crawl. The thumbnail popped up in the corner, but the main windows stayed grey for a moment, then flashed white, then shoved out something I still have a hard time describing. The trees were there, the trail, the foreground, all of it a little more washed out than the other frames, as if the exposure had gone sideways. But where he should have been, in that center space he'd claimed, there was just absence. Not blur, not a glitch mosaic, just a kind of wrong nothing, a smudged void where the pixels didn't know what to be. The IR wash made halos around it, like light bending around a hole. Every time I blinked, I expected my eyes to fix it. They didn't. The file name at the top still had the same name. The timestamp said 2:48. The EXIF data in the corner cheerfully reported a normal exposure, normal sensor operation. But the man wasn't there anymore, and he wasn't not there. The spot where he should have been looked like someone had taken a rough eraser to reality. "Okay," I said, voice thin. "Okay, that's not." I couldn't even finish the sentence. I clicked the next frame with my heart hammering loud enough I could hear it in my ears. Empty clearing. No man. No void. Just deer in the far background again. Eyes ghost bright in the IR. Like nothing had happened. I flicked back and forth between the last 3 shots. Him facing the camera. Void. Empty trail. Facing. Void. Empty. My stomach rolled like I'd swallowed bad gas station sushi. I pushed the chair back fast enough it bumped into the filing cabinet. For a couple seconds, maybe longer, I just stood there, gripping the edge of the desk, staring down at the floor. My boots looked wrong. The linoleum looked wrong. Everything had that dreamlike, too sharp edge you get when your brain decides it's had enough. I should have called someone in right then. Tom. Anyone. "Hey, look at this. Tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing." Instead, I locked the office door. I don't know why that was my first instinct. Fear of being watched, I guess. Fear of the ceiling camera. Fear of another human face seeing mine while I was looking at that void and realizing I was losing it. The lock snicked shut with this tiny, final sound. It didn't make me feel better. I turned back to the monitor. The mouse cursor hovered over the zoom icon like it was going to jump on its own. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my pants and forced myself to click. The void didn't get any simpler up close. The edges were jagged, like torn paper. The pixels around it were warped inward, as if they were leaning toward whatever was inside. I thought I saw patterns in the noise, circles, lines, maybe even the hint of features, and then they were gone, like looking too hard at static on an old TV. "It's a corrupted frame," I muttered. "Just a corruption. Bad card. Bad sensor. Happens all the time." Except it doesn't. Not like that. Not as one single frame in a sequence where everything else was fine. I zoomed back out. My eyes slid to the previous shot, whether I wanted them to or not. He was still there, closer than he'd ever been, squared up, facing the camera, facing me. I minimized the window. The desktop looked almost offensively normal. Park logo, a couple folders, recycle bin. My hand drifted to my chest without thinking, fingers pressing over the spot where my radio usually sat. "Same man," I whispered, because saying it made it real in a way that thinking it didn't. "Different camera. You shouldn't be able to do that." If every other time he'd been sideways, listening to some angle of the forest I couldn't see, this felt like the moment he turned, not just toward the lens, toward the person on the other side. Me. I didn't sleep that night. I went home, locked the door, pulled the curtain over the tiny kitchen window that looks out toward the station road. I set my phone face down on the counter because I didn't want to see the little black circle of the front-facing camera. It was stupid. It was too late. If he can crawl into old photos, he can crawl into anything. Every 20 minutes or so, I'd see that frame flash behind my eyes again. Him standing 10 yards from the camera, shoulders squared, head tilted just enough that even in low res, I knew his attention had shifted. Up until then, I'd been able to pretend I was just watching him. That night, for the first time, I knew he was watching back. The night we started seeing him while we were still on the mountain was the night I stopped pretending this was just a glitch. Up to then, there was always distance. I saw him hours later in a warm office, safe behind a dead screen. He was part of the past, something I could pause, rewind, zoom. Ugly, sure, but contained. This night, he wasn't past tense anymore. It started like too many bad nights out here do, with a kid. Not a full-on Amber Alert situation. Not yet. Just enough pieces out of place that the hair on the back of my neck went up before the radio finished talking. Backcountry base. Dispatch sounded tight. You copy? I was in the gear room, fighting with a rain shell zipper that had blown one tooth out. I dropped it and grabbed the mic. Backcountry, go. We've got a delayed return at Klingman's. 10-year-old girl, named Lily, was hiking the loop with her dad and younger brother. Dad says she ran ahead near the tower, went around a bend, didn't come back. He thought she was hiding to scare them, but he's been looking for 2 hours. Weather's rolling in. You available? My stomach did that slow, heavy drop it always does when you hear 10-year-old and weather in the same sentence. I'm available, I said. Who's on SAR lead? Tom. He's already en route up there. We're staging out of the Forney Ridge lot. You're on Hasty with him. Copy, I said. Give me 10 to gear up. Klingman's Dome is the highest point in the park. On clear days you can see forever from the tower. On nights like the one that was brewing, it turns into a cold, wet wind tunnel where sound and light get weird. I loaded my pack on autopilot. Headlamp with fresh batteries, extra batteries in a Ziploc, first aid kit, thermal blanket, flagging tape, spare gloves, extra radio battery. I hesitated, then grabbed a handful of fresh SD cards and stuffed them in a side pocket. Habit now. Out in the lot, the clouds had already chewed off the top of the ridge. You couldn't see the actual summit from the station, just a solid sheet of grey. The air had that electric taste you get before a storm hits. As I was climbing into the truck, Mia jogged over, shoving a beanie onto her head. You're going up? She asked, slightly out of breath. Yeah, Tom's got Hasty. You on base? Sort of, she said. We're trying something new. You know those cell-enabled cams they've been testing on the north side? I frowned. The spy points. Yeah, somebody had the bright idea to drop a few along the loop and the ridge spur during the search. They can ping back thumbnails every time they trip, and we don't have to wait for someone to hike the cards out. I'm babysitting the feed down here while you guys are up there. I didn't like that, for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. Cameras had always been the afterstory for me. A way to see what happened, not a way to watch it in progress. All right, I said anyway. Text if you see anything useful. She nodded, eyes serious. We'll hit you over radio too. Just keep your phone where you can feel it. The drive up to Klingman's was tense. Winding mountain road, rain starting to spit, wipers squeaking on the glass. Every time the trees broke and I caught a glimpse of the ridge, it looked closer and smaller than it should, like the clouds were pressing down on it. By the time I pulled into the lot, Tom was there with 2 other rangers and 3 volunteers. The dad and the little brother huddled near the trailhead sign, a blanket around both of them, the kid's face scrubbed raw from crying. We got the basics in the rain. Lily, 10, purple rain jacket, black leggings with little stars on them, light-up sneakers that probably didn't do much on wet rock. Last seen near the paved path just below the tower. Dad thought she'd gone around a curve to hide. When she didn't come out, he checked the tower, called her name, started back down. Nothing. Any off-trail access around there? Tom asked me quietly, when the dad stepped away to talk to a volunteer. There's a couple of social paths people have worn in near the walls, I said. Nothing official, some loose rock. If she went off those in the fog, she could have lost sight of the main path easy. He grunted. We'll take the paved loop as a hasty. You and me on point. Johnson and Clark leapfrogging behind, checking the edges. Volunteers sweeping the lower spur. We've got 3 cell cams already in place. 1 near the tower, 1 at the first big curve, 1 on the spur trail. Base will call if she pings any of them. Got it, I said. I flicked my headlamp on. Mist caught in the beam like dust. The tower up above was just a faint suggestion in the fog. As we headed up the path, my phone buzzed. Text from Mia. Cam T1 online. No hits yet. Weather looks nasty up there. Keep your radio dry. I shoved the phone back into my outer pocket where I'd feel it. The rain started in earnest 5 minutes later. Night searches in bad weather are a special kind of hell. Your world shrinks to a cone of light in front of you. Sound changes. Every tree looks like every other tree. Add a scared kid to the mix, and your brain starts doing this ugly loop of possibilities that you have to keep shoving down if you want to function. Lily, I called, every couple of minutes. Park Ranger, if you hear my voice, shout back. My voice sounded small in the fog. We hit the first curve where one of Mia's new cams was strapped to the rail, its little antenna blinking a faint green. I gave it a nod like it could see me. Hey, new guy, I muttered under my breath. Do your job. Tom gave me a quick sideways look. You talking to the hardware again? Always, I said. At least it doesn't talk back. We pushed on, checked little breaks in the wall where a kid might have ducked, shone lights down slopes we couldn't climb in that weather. Radios crackled every 15 minutes with other teams' updates. Negative here. 1 possible boot print, continuing to track. No sound response. About 40 minutes in, my phone buzzed again. I stopped on the wet concrete, making sure my boots had purchase, and pulled it out. It was a picture message from Mia, one of the live cams. The image was grainy, washed greenish by the IR. It showed a section of path maybe 30 yards behind where Tom and I had just passed, a curve with the guardrail, the fog thick enough that the far edge blurred. In the center of the frame, off to the side of the path, just beyond the rail, was a small figure in a purple jacket. Lily. She was turned away from the camera, head down, like she was looking at something over the drop. The light from her headlamp made a faint halo around her. My heart jumped. Tom, I called. Back up a sec. He came closer, breath puffing in the damp air. I held the screen where he could see, careful not to drop it. That's her, he said immediately. What's the timestamp? I squinted. 1942. I checked my watch. 1949. She's close, I said. That's like a few hundred yards behind us, tops. Tom keyed his radio. Base, hasty team. We got a hit on T1. Lily appears in frame at 1942, standing at the outside edge of the curve, looking over the rail. We're turning back. Mia's voice came through with a little static. Copy, hasty. We're watching the feed. No new hits since that one. We pivoted and moved fast but careful. Running on slick concrete in the dark is a good way to add your own name to the board. I kept glancing down at the phone, waiting for a new image to come in. It stayed stubbornly blank. We reached the curve in under 3 minutes. My beam skated over the rail, the drop, the greasy wet rocks below. No purple jacket, no small figure, just our own breath and the wind. Lily! I shouted. Lily, can you hear me? It's the park rangers! Nothing but the storm. Tom checked along the rail, looking for scuff marks, small handprints. I climbed up on the low wall, braced carefully, shone my light down the slope, searching for any hit of color. Nothing, I said through gritted teeth. If she went over here, there'd be something. Broken brush, a mark. My phone buzzed again. Another picture from Mia, this one from a different angle. T2, the cam near the tower. The frame was a mess of fog and concrete and the outline of the observation ramp, and way at the edge, near the tree line beyond the tower, a tiny purple dot. She just hit T2, the text said, arriving a half second later. That's up near the top. You're below her. She's moving uphill, I said, frowning. Why the hell? Tom was already talking into the radio, redirecting one of the upper teams toward the tower. We started up after them. My legs burned. The rain had turned to something halfway between sleet and needles. As we climbed, my phone buzzed again. Another image. At first, I thought it was another shot of Lily. The height in the frame was about right. Same path, different section, same fog. Then the rest of my brain caught up. Purple jacket. That was Lily. Brown jacket. That was him. He was standing on the inside of a curve this time, just off the paved path, at the edge of the trees. Sideways. Still. Same distance from the camera as always. Same damn posture like he was listening to something deeper in the woods. The little green antenna icon in the corner told me this was from T3, one of the units we'd supposedly strapped on a tree along the Fawny Ridge spur, farther out than we'd even gotten yet. Mia hadn't had time to add text to this one. The picture was just there, raw, on my screen. Tom, I said quietly. He looked over my shoulder. The muscle in his jaw jumped. Is that your guy? He asked. Yeah, I said. My voice came out thin. That's the jacket. He stared at the image for 2 beats longer than I was comfortable with. Where is that? He asked. I swallowed. Has to be T3, spur trail, but we're not there yet. No one is there yet. As if on cue, my radio crackled. Base to Hasty, Tom answered. Hasty, go. Mia's voice was tight, higher than usual. We're getting hits on T2 and T3 alternating. Lily on T2, that man on T3. It's like... She broke off, came back. It's like they're leapfrogging. She's closer to the tower. He's on the spur. I can't tell if she's turning or... Static swallowed the rest. Tom swore under his breath. Say again, Base? Only a wash of white noise came back. Storm's messing with the repeater, I said. My shoulder felt suddenly very aware of the radio's weight. We're in the shadow of the dome. It'll clear if we move. He nodded, but there was a tightness around his eyes I hadn't seen before. We pushed on toward the tower. Somewhere up there in the fog, there were 2 teams fanning out, calling Lily's name. Somewhere off the spur, that man in the jacket was standing in the trees like he was waiting to hear where she'd go next. My phone kept buzzing intermittently. Some images made it through, others didn't. Glimpses, like flashing frames in a nightmare. Lily at the tower railing, back turned to the camera, rain harsh in the IR. The man off the spur, same spot, same pose, same distance each time, as if he'd staked out a place only he knew. In one frame, just one, I saw something that made the hairs on my arms go up even through the wet fabric. It was from T2. The angle showed a slice of the observation ramp, the little metal fence, the fogged-out background. Lily was in the foreground, turned 3/4 away, and in the far distance, between the railings, in the trees below the rise, a smear of brown, the barest suggestion of a cap brim. He was further away there than usual, a bad copy of a bad copy in a bad image, but I recognized him anyway. He wasn't just on the spur, he was below the tower too. Why isn't she answering? Mia's earlier voice echoed in my head. She doesn't respond to any of the teams near her position. We reached the base of the tower ramp just as the wind really picked up. The structure groaned softly, concrete and steel flexing. I could barely hear Tom's shouts over the howl. Lily, he bellowed. It's the park rangers. We know you're up here. Can you shout back? Nothing but the storm, again. My radio chose that moment to spit back to life in a burst. Say again, Hasty. Repeat. Do not go past. More static. Then, faintly. Possible hazard on the spur. Markers may be wrong. Base. You're cutting out, I said. Say that again about markers. No reply. Tom and I exchanged a look. Hazard on the spur, he said. Markers wrong. That doesn't sound good. The Forney Ridge Spur is not a place you want to get creative with flagging. Lots of steep drop-offs, narrow sections, spots where the trail is barely trail at all. We'd put reflective tags on certain trees over the years to help in searches. If those were wrong, I thought about the man in the jacket standing at the edge of the spur in T3, perfectly centered in the frame every time. We regrouped at the top with the other teams. No sign of Lily on the tower. No sign of her on the immediate slopes below. Her name echoed in the fog and didn't come back. We split again, this time with two teams sweeping down the spur despite the radio warning. There was no way around it. If she'd gone that way, we had to know. I ended up with one of the volunteer guys, Clark, on the spur team. We moved in slow, deliberate steps. Headlamps low, beams cutting across wet rock and black roots. The first few reflective markers we saw were where I remembered them being. Tagged trees catching our beams like little eyes. Then we came around a tighter section, and something looked off. Hold up, I said. Clark stopped. What? I shone my light on a cluster of tags ahead. 3 reflective squares on 3 different trees, all winking back at us. The problem was, the one showing the trail was pointing dead toward a spot I knew damn well dropped off into a ravine. Those aren't right, I said. My mouth felt dry despite the rain. We didn't put them like that. You sure? He asked. Storm maybe blew one? They're stapled, not taped. I stepped closer. The metal glinted. Fresh staple, bright silver. No rust, no weathering. It looked like someone had just put it there that day. The trail ahead looked clear for about 15 feet, then sloped away sharply into a tangle of wet sheetrock and laurel. In low light with a scared kid and a flashlight beam, you could absolutely think that was the way to go. How bad is the drop? Clark asked quietly. Bad enough, I said. You slide there in this weather. You're not stopping where you want to. I backed up until I found the older tag, the one I remembered. It was half-peeled, rusty staple, hanging on a tree off to the left, where a narrow, scrubby path wound between rhodo bushes. We go this way, I said, not where the shiny ones say. Someone move 'em? Clark asked. Yeah, I said. My stomach turned. Looks like. We flagged the correct route with fresh tape, marked the wrong tags to fix later, then pushed on. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. A 10-year-old in a purple jacket could have followed the wrong shimmer and gone right over the edge. We didn't find her at the bottom of that ravine. I'm still not sure if that's a mercy or not. We sent another team to grid it in daylight. Nothing. No jacket, no shoes, no body. What we did find, half a mile further along the spur on a little knoll overlooking a stand of firs, was one of Mia's cell cams, or what was left of it. The strap was still wrapped around the tree. The plastic housing was on the ground in 3 pieces. The lens was spiderwebbed with cracks, tiny shards glittering in our headlamps. The antenna had been snapped clean off and was lying a couple feet away like someone had plucked it on purpose. The SD slot was empty. Bear? Clark asked, though he didn't sound convinced. Maybe, I said automatically. Bears do mess with cameras. They chew, claw, knock them sideways. But this didn't look like a mauling. It looked like somebody had taken the unit off, smashed it on a rock, then thoughtfully removed the card. I picked up one piece of plastic, turned it over. The back had faint scuff marks that might have been from boots, or just from impact. Hard to tell in the rain. My phone buzzed. I almost laughed. Of course it chose that moment. No image this time. Just a text from Mia that had clearly spent some time fighting its way through bad reception before emerging. T3 just went offline, it said. Last frame didn't transmit. I stared at the message, then down at the smashed camera in my hand. "Yeah," I whispered. "I noticed." When we finally came off the mountain near dawn, soaked and half frozen, we had to walk past the dad and the little brother again. I couldn't meet his eyes. We hadn't found her. Not that night. Not the next day. Not at all, so far as I know. Back at the station, after everyone else stumbled toward showers or beds, I ended up once again in front of a screen. This time, it was the live cam terminal on Mia's desk, showing the last batch of thumbnails that had made it out before T3 died. She'd saved them all for me. T2, Lily at the tower, back turned. T2 again, empty ramp, fog. T3, the man at the edge of the spur, sideways, listening. T3 again, same. T3, empty clearing. And then, one last image for T3, partially corrupted. Half the frame intact, trees, trail, a sliver of the smashed camera's own strap hanging down. The other half smeared into that same unsettling nothingness I'd seen on 9. Somewhere inside that blur, if I let my eyes go soft, I thought I could see the shape of a shoulder turning. That night was the first time he was there while we were, while the search was still happening, while we were actively trying to pull a kid back from the edge. He wasn't just in the story after the fact anymore. He was in it with us. Chapter 7. After Klingman's, they benched me. They didn't call it that, of course. It was mandatory rest. Administrative review. Take a couple days, clear your head, we're all shaken up. But that's what it was. I was the guy who kept bringing up the man in the brown jacket while we had a 10-year-old missing in a storm. That doesn't play well in a debrief. The morning after, I sat in the conference room with wet hair and a coffee I couldn't taste while my supervisor, Daniels, and Tom went through the incident. The room always smells like dry erase markers and old carpet. Today, it also smelled like wet wool, stress sweat, and that faint metallic tang of rain dried on gear. Conditions were bad, Daniels said, tapping his pen against a printout of the search map. Visibility low, radio interference. You made reasonable calls with the information you had. It was the kind of thing people say when they're building up to the part where you didn't. He flipped to another page. But there are a couple of issues we need to talk about. He went down the list. The mistagged spur markers, the smashed cell cam, the fact that we'd sent a team down toward that ravine before confirming the tags were correct. None of that was directly my fault, but it all lived in the same orbit. And, Daniel said, after a beat too long, there's the matter of this. He slid a page across the table. It was a printout from one of the T3 images. Grainy, rain-streaked, familiar. The man in the brown jacket standing at the spur's edge. I stared at it. My heartbeat ticked louder than the clock. "You've mentioned this individual before," Daniel said. "On Madron, Porters, the lot cam." "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded rough, like I'd been yelling all night. "That's him." "You're sure?" he asked. Not aggressive, just careful. "Same jacket, same stance, same distance." "Yeah." He studied my face more than the picture. Tom cleared his throat. "To be fair, we've got him on multiple feeds now," he said. "Not just the old stills you were looking at. That's T3, night of the search. Whoever he is, he was on the spur while we were up there." Daniels nodded slowly. "Understood. I'm not saying he's not real. I'm saying we don't know what his involvement is, if any. Could be a local who got curious and followed the commotion. Could be another hiker." "In that weather?" I said before I could stop myself. "At that time, standing perfectly still at the edge of a bad trail." Daniel's gaze sharpened just a hair. "And that's where we start to have a problem, Ranger. Because in your written report and in your verbal notes, you don't call him a man, you call him the same man." "He is the same man," I said. "How do you know?" he asked. "You haven't seen his face. You don't have identifying features beyond a generic jacket and cap." I've looked at some of the frames myself. If you showed them to me without context, I'd say, guy in a coat. That's all. Then why does he keep showing up at the edge of our worst days? I asked. Silence for a second. Rain tapped at the small window. Daniels closed the folder with a quiet, final motion. I think you're tired, he said. We all are. It's been a bad season. We've got 2 unresolved missing adult cases and now a child. You've been on more than your share of call-outs. It sounded rehearsed, like he'd decided on this speech before we sat down. I'm not hallucinating, I said. No one's saying that, he said, which of course meant he was at least considering it. What I am saying is, you've been living in these cameras, old footage, new footage, archived anomalies. You're doing that thing Hargrove used to do. That name landed like a stone. What thing? I asked carefully. Tom shifted in his chair, looking away. Daniels sighed. Seeing connections everywhere, he said. Reading meaning into noise. Hargrove was a good ranger, smart, dedicated. But toward the end, everything on a screen looked like a pattern to him. He started talking about, I don't even remember his phrase. Digital shadows, something like that. He stopped trusting what he saw with his own eyes if there wasn't a picture to back it up. He paused. We lost him a couple years before you came on. Early retirement. Not a pretty process. I thought about the binder I'd found. The shaky handwriting at the end. The unsub mail notes. Did he ever show you the photos? I asked. Daniels frowned. Some. Old poaching cases, a couple of false alarms. Why? Tom met my eyes for the first time in a while. What are you getting at? He asked. I found his binder in the archive, I said. He was tracking something, not just poachers. He wrote about a man showing up in multiple camera locations. Pose identical. Daniel's jaw tightened. Those notes should have been boxed and sent to Central, he said. They're not for current staff. I'm current staff, I said, and I'm seeing the same man he saw. There it was, out loud. Not just in my head. It sounded crazier than it had the first time I thought it, which is saying something. Daniels rubbed his temple. I'm not going to get into ghosts and patterns with you, he said. Here's what I am going to say. You're off backcountry duty for a week. Desk work only. After that, we'll reevaluate. It felt like a punch. You're pulling me from SAR. For a week, he said. On paper, it's rest. In reality, it's so you don't walk yourself into a ravine because you're staring at trees thinking you see a jacket in every shadow. Take the time. Sleep. Don't look at cameras. He gave me that manager look that's supposed to be reassuring. All it did was make the room feel smaller. Understood, I said, because what else do you say? Tom lingered as Daniels gathered his papers and left. He shut the conference room door softly behind him. You know this isn't a punishment, Tom said. Sure, I said. Just a coincidence I get sidelined right when you're on the edge, he cut in, not unkindly. I've seen people go down this road. You start seeing what you expect instead of what's there. You start looking at a forest full of noise and thinking every twig snap is out to get you. He's real, I said. You saw the T3 frames. I saw a man in a jacket, he said, more than once. I saw some concerning behavior with the tags. I saw a smashed camera. All of that is real. But you're the only one saying it's the same man every time. You're the only one talking like he's bigger than that. I'm the only one who's gone through the archives, I said. The old cases, Hargrove's stuff, the training photos. Tom's eyes flicked away. Hargrove went off the deep end, he said quietly. Started seeing that guy in shots that didn't have anyone in them, arguing with us over pixels. He lost the thread, man. Don't be him. What happened to him? I asked. He hesitated. Moved out west. That's what I heard. Some little town, last I knew. Maybe he's watching elk cams now. yelling about a different jacket. It was a bad joke, and we both knew it. When the meeting ended, I didn't go home right away. I wandered the halls like a ghost, hands in my pockets, half hoping, half dreading I'd see that brown jacket in some reflective surface. The "Enjoy the park, but stay aware" poster was still on the corkboard. The family on the bridge was still there. So was the sliver of brown in the trees behind them. "Don't look at cameras," Daniels had said. I lasted about 6 hours. I went home, sat on my couch, turned the TV on for noise, and stared at nothing. The late afternoon light slid across the floor. Dust floating in it looked like static. I told myself I was going to nap, maybe the first real sleep in weeks. Instead, I lay there on top of the covers, listening to the refrigerator hum and the occasional car go by, and thought about Hargrove. I couldn't shake the image of him sitting where I'd been sitting in that back office, hunched over the same crappy keyboard. How many times had he scrolled past that man before anyone noticed? How long had he been the only one seeing him? At some point, I got up, made coffee I didn't need, stood in my tiny kitchen with the mug cooling in my hand, and stared at the dark glass of the window over the sink. My reflection stared back. Behind it, the world outside warped into a vague green blur. My own face looked like it had been cut out and pasted on. My eyes slid to the corner of the window frame where my cheap little stick-on thermometer sat. Next to it was the tiniest dot of black plastic, the lens of the landlord-installed security camera pointed at the front steps. They'd added it after some kids broke into a neighbor's car. I'd never thought much about it. Cheap, cloud-connected, the kind of thing you can buy at Walmart for $40. Probably recording me standing there in my socks, staring like an idiot. If he can slide into park cams, I muttered. What's stopping him from showing up on these? The thought made my teeth ache. I went back to the couch, stared at my phone, opened, closed, opened the Photos app without really meaning to. Most of my pictures are boring: trail shots, sunsets, the occasional blurry bare butt, a raccoon in a dumpster, some tourist dog that liked me, a couple group photos from staff cookouts, one or two half-hearted attempts at dating apps that never went anywhere. I hadn't looked at most of them in months. I scrolled. It started as self-punishment. Some part of me wanted to prove I was cracked, that I'd start seeing brown jackets in every tree and finally have to admit Daniels was right. Photo: me and Tom and Mia at the fall barbecue last year, smoke from the grill making everything look hazy. No one in the background but a picnic table and a cooler. Photo: a storm over the ridge, taken from my porch. Just clouds, no hidden faces. Photo: selfie in the gear room with a stupid first 20-mile day of the season caption. I looked younger there, less worn, no jackets, no caps, no sideways listeners. I should have stopped. Instead, I thought of the binder again, of the way Hargrove had labeled things, of how his notes had stopped abruptly. If he'd been seeing the same man in the footage long enough to write unsub male and pose identical, where had that taken him? He'd done more than just print things. He'd kept digital copies. I knew that much from the half-empty folders on the archive drive. Some of them were password locked. I hadn't had the patience or the authority to try to crack them. But Hargrove had also been lazy in little ways. The binder, left on a shelf. Maybe something else, somewhere less obvious. I found myself back at the station around 10 that night, jeans and a hoodie instead of uniform, telling the night duty guy I'd forgotten something. It wasn't a total lie. I'd forgotten where my sense of self-preservation was. In the archive room, the air was colder than usual. The AC unit rattled in the corner. I pulled the camera anomalies binder off the shelf again, flipped to the back. Nothing new, obviously. Just that last entry, a camera number and 3 question marks. I slid my hand along the shelf, feeling for gaps. One of the boxes wedged against the wall moved a little too easily. Behind it, taped to the drywall, was an old, flat, hard drive enclosure. The tape had yellowed. The USB cable dangled down like a tail. "Hargrove," I whispered. "You sneaky bastard." I pulled it out, dust puffing around my hands, and took it back to the back office. The computer whined when I plugged it in, like it was offended at being asked to work this late. A new drive letter popped up. Inside, a single folder labeled Harg_private. No password. Just there. I opened it. Dozens of image files. Some with normal names. cam7_2015.jpg. Some with his weird shorthand. bunk_odd1. Hall 2. Locker question mark with 3 question marks after it. My hands were clammy on the mouse. I picked bunk odd 1 because apparently I hate myself. The image that popped up was of the old bunk room. Before we remodeled last year, we had this long, narrow space with 4 metal-framed beds, 2 on each side, a window at the far end. I recognized the cheap bedspreads, the dent in the wall where somebody's pack frame had smacked it. In the shot, the room was dark except for the wash of a nightlight near the door. One of the bunks on the left had a person in it, blankets pulled up, face turned toward the wall. I didn't know Hargrove, not really, but I'd seen a photo of him once in an old staff newsletter. Big guy, beard, shaved head. The shape in the bunk matched that. Broad shoulders, that particular way big men curl when they're trying to fit on a narrow mattress. At the far end of the room, on the right-hand side, in the shadow between the last bunk and the wall, stood the man in the brown jacket. He was angled sideways, as always, facing toward the window, listening to something I couldn't see. His cap brim cut a shadow across his face. The nightlight grazed the edge of his jacket, picking out the familiar diagonal crease. The timestamp in the corner said 2nd of March, 2016, 2:13. The camera name overlay said Bunk Cam. I checked the EXIF. The file had been created that night, according to the data. Modified only once, about a week later, presumably when Hargrove had copied it. I flipped to Bunk Odd 2. Same room, same angle, same sleeping form. The nightlight glow was a little dimmer, like the bulb was fading. The man in the jacket was closer now, halfway down the aisle between the beds. Bunk Odd 3. He was standing almost at the foot of Hargrove's bed. He hadn't changed posture, still sideways, still listening, just closer. There was a 4th file. Bunk Odd 4. I hesitated, then opened it. This one was corrupted, like the 9 void frame. Half the image intact, bed, blanket, wall. The other half consumed by that awful, chewed-out nothing. The edge of the blanket where Hargrove's feet would be was just gone, like the world had been smudged there. My skin crawled. I backed out of the folder so fast I almost clicked the wrong thing. The drive list swam for a second. If he'd been in the bunk room with Hargrove, standing at his bed in the dark, then at some point, Hargrove had woken up to the idea that there was something in his room that didn't leave footprints, and nobody had believed him. I should have stopped there, closed the drive, put it back, gone home, quit. Instead, I opened a different folder. Hall 2 was a shot down the station hallway, empty except for the poster and the reflection of the exit sign. He wasn't in that one. Locker was of the gear room, row of lockers, boots lined up. No brown jacket. The last file in the list caught my eye. Bunk New. The timestamp on it was from 3 months ago, well after Hargrove had left. A cold prickling started at the base of my neck and walked down my spine. I opened it. Same bunk room, but post-remodel. I recognized the new paint, the new wooden frames, the little shelf by each bed where people propped their phones. Only 2 bunks now, mine and Tom's, back when we were both still pulling overnights there instead of trading off more often. In the shot, one of the bunks had a person in it. On the right-hand side, blankets pulled up to the chest, one arm thrown over the eyes. Me. My hair was shorter, my beard scruffier, but it was me. I could tell from the scar on my left forearm where I'd caught it on a rusty nail years ago. From the stupid t-shirt with the faded trail logo I only wear to sleep. At the far end of the room, by the door, in the shadow between the wall and the frame, stood the man in the brown jacket, sideways, listening. The timestamp, 18th of July, 2023, 0213, same minute as Hargrove's old shot. My knees actually went weak. That's not a metaphor. I had to sit down fast before I pitched over. I didn't remember that night. Not specifically. It would have been one of 100 bunk nights in summer. Long day, shower, collapse. Maybe I dreamed something weird, rolled over, cursed the snoring, gone back to sleep. All the while, he'd been standing at the end of the room, just out of range of my tired human senses, perfectly visible to the little black glass eye in the corner. I forced myself to click to the next file I hadn't noticed. Bunk New 2. Same shot. He was halfway down the room now, closer to me. Bunk New 3. He was at the foot of my bed, still sideways, still listening. His head tilted just the slightest bit more, like he was angling his ear toward my breathing. There was no Bunk New 4 in the folder, no void frame, no aftermath, just those three, like somebody had cut the sequence short. My heart hammered so hard it made my vision pulse. I could hear blood in my ears over the hum of the computer. He'd been in the same room with me, not on a trail I could avoid, not on a mountain I could choose not to climb. In the one place we're supposed to be off-duty and unobserved, in the dark, while I slept. Same man, different camera, same time, different ranger. Hargrove had seen him there. I'd seen him there. How many others had he visited while the cameras did their job and nobody thought to look? I closed every window, yanked the drive icon to the trash out of pure reflex, even though that didn't do anything but make a little ding, unplugged the cable like it might bite me. The office felt cramped. The ceiling camera's black dome glinted faintly near the door. I found myself looking straight up at it. "If you're listening," I said, voice shaking, "if you're really using these things like doors or windows or whatever the hell they are." I trailed off. I didn't know what I was doing. Praying, bargaining, taunting. None of it made sense. I shoved the hard drive into my pack. I shouldn't have. It was evidence of something, but I couldn't stand the idea of leaving it there. On the way out, I paused in the bunk room. Lights off, just the green glow of the emergency exit sign bleeding under the door. The new bunks. The little shelf where my phone would sit if I was sleeping over. I walked to the foot of my bunk and stood there, 10 yards from where the camera in the corner could see me. The exact spot he'd been standing in that third frame. I could almost feel him there, like the ghost of a pose imprinted on the air. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding small in the dark. "Okay, you want to be in every camera? Fine." That was the moment I decided to stop just watching old footage. If he was going to keep stepping into our world through glass eyes and IR flashes, I was going to put one where he had no reason to be. Not a park camera, not the lot cam, not the bunk cam. Mine. A trail cam in my own house. Chapter 8. I did exactly what Daniels told me not to do. I brought the cameras home. Not the parks, officially. I'm not that reckless on paper. We confiscate gear sometimes. Cheap trail cams poachers use, or doorbell cams people rip off cabins and leave lying around. When nobody claims them after a certain amount of time, they go into this limbo pile. Surplus equipment, which is a polite way of saying junk we might use someday. I took one of those. Little off-brand thing, no bigger than my hand. Plastic housing, generic green-brown camo pattern like somebody spray-painted leaves on it. 4 AA batteries, slot for a micro SD card, no park asset tag, no serial number logged in our system, just a forgotten box at the bottom of a crate. If you dug through my belongings right now, you'd find it listed as personal property because I signed the right lines and made the right noises. On paper, it's just a cheap trail cam a tired ranger bought on his week off for wildlife watching. In reality, I pointed it at my bed. My apartment's not big. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room kitchen thing that smells like old coffee and wet gear half the time. Beige walls, beige carpet, blinds that rattle in the wind. If you stand in the hallway, you can see the front door, the bathroom on the left, my bedroom on the right. I put the camera on the high shelf across from my bed, wedged between an old map and a busted headlamp. Aimed it down so it could see the whole room, door, foot of the bed, the little window above the nightstand. Set it to photo mode, high sensitivity, no visible flash, just IR. "All right," I said to it, feeling ridiculous. "You're 10. 9's the oak in Cades Cove, 3's on Madron, 7's the drama queen that always dies in the rain." I shouldn't have named this one, but I did. Maybe part of me wanted it to feel like backup. I slid a fresh card in, tapped the plastic against my teeth out of habit. It made that little hollow clack. The rational part of my brain was still talking loud. "You're proving something," it said. "If he's only in park cameras, maybe he's tied to those systems. Maybe this thing will sit here all week and do nothing, and you can write it off as stress and bad coffee." The rest of me remembered the bunk shots on Hargroves Drive. The man at the foot of the bed while I slept, listening. I brushed my teeth, turned off the living room light, checked the front door twice. When I finally lay down, my own headlamp was on the nightstand within reach. So was my phone. So was the knife I usually keep in my pack. Sleep that night was patches. I'd drift, jerk awake at some floorboard creak, stare at the faint LED on 10, and tell myself I was an idiot. Every time I opened my eyes, I half expected to see a silhouette in the doorway. Morning came like someone slapped a light on, grey through the blinds, the sound of a car door outside. My mouth tasted like copper and stale coffee. The first thing I did, before coffee, before a shower, was take the card out of 10. It was warm from running all night. I carried it back to the kitchen table where my old laptop lives, like I was carrying something fragile and explosive. The laptop's seen better days. The fan sounds like a sick insect. The trackpad hates me. But it read the card just fine. Hundreds of images. Timestamps marching down the screen. 21:03, 21:15, 22:01, all the way through the night. I clicked the first few. Me coming in, dropping my keys, pulling off my boots. Me walking in and out of the frame, blurry mid-step. At one point I looked straight at the camera, eyes hollow, forgot it was there. Then sleep. Me under the covers, one arm flung out, mouth open in a way that made me wince. The cheap digital eye doesn't flatter anyone. I skimmed. The room stayed the same. Door shut, window shut, no brown jacket, no cap, no sideways listeners. At 2:13, there was a glitch. Not him, just a single frame with a line of noise running through it, a horizontal smear across my chest. Could have been anything. Card hiccup, sensor burp, cosmic ray. The next one looked fine again. I rolled past it. By the time I hit the morning shots, me sitting up, rubbing my face, shuffling out toward the bathroom, I felt stupid. Relieved, but also stupid. "Congratulations," I told 10, flipping the card back out. "You recorded 8 hours of me snoring. Pulitzer stuff." I almost packed it up right then, almost wrapped the whole experiment in "I tried," and went back to pretending the world worked the way it's supposed to. Instead, I changed the batteries, put the card back in, and left it where it was. Night 2, I slept a little better. Fatigue does that. You can be terrified and still knock out if your body's done negotiating. No nightmares that I remember, just the usual vague stress dreams, lost paperwork, endless hallways, the feeling of running in mud. When my alarm went off, I felt hungover without the fun. Card out, laptop on, same routine. This time, I started at 2 o'clock. 2:01. Me in bed, same position I'd fallen asleep in, face half buried in the pillow. 2:08. Rolled onto my back, one arm over my forehead, mouth open again. Great. 2:13. He was standing in the doorway, not close, maybe 8, 9 feet away from the bed, backlit by the faint glow from the streetlight seeping through the blinds in the living room. Brown canvas jacket, cap brim low, sideways, listening to the hallway or to the apartment beyond, or to something I couldn't see. He hadn't been in the 0212 frame. The door was just empty, a cut-out rectangle of darker space. At 2:13, he took up that space like he'd always owned it. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until my chest started to ache. I zoomed in. The cheap sensor didn't give me much. Grain and blur, the IR trying to decide what was warm. But the jacket's folds were right. That diagonal crease crossing the chest, the way his shoulder dipped a little, the brim cutting shadow across where his eyes should be. The timestamp ticked away in the corner, cheerfully oblivious. I clicked to 2:14. He was closer, halfway between the door and the bed now. Same sideways posture, same tilt of the head toward the hallway. My sleeping self hadn't moved, one arm still thrown out, oblivious. In that frame, I could see more detail of his clothes. The jacket looked wrong, not in how it was shaped, but in how it sat on him. No sag, no wrinkles except the big crease. It was like it had been drawn on instead of worn. "Stop," I said, out loud, to my own hand. It didn't. 2:15. He was at the foot of the bed. 10 had caught him almost perfectly centered. The lens wasn't wide enough to take in all of him at that distance, so his feet were cut off just below the shins. He took up the whole lower third of the frame. My blanket-covered legs were in front, his shape behind them, turned sideways, head angled, down now, like he was listening to my breathing. The room around him looked wrong too, slightly warped. The nightstand's edges bowed inward just a hair. The window frame behind his shoulder bent a little, like the pixels were leaning toward him. I rolled my chair back so hard it bumped the fridge. The laptop screen blurred, then snapped back into focus. There was one more image in the sequence before 10 switched back to 15-minute intervals. 2:16. No him, no doorway, no foot of the bed, just my room. Except the foot of the bed, the exact spot where he'd been standing, was chewed, like the corrupted frame from 9, but smaller. A patch of nothing where the covers and carpet should be. Noise smeared into the shape of an absence. It was about the size of a man's torso. The timestamp was fine. The EXIF data said everything was normal. 10 hadn't thought anything was wrong. I closed the window, sat there with my hand over my mouth until my fingers went numb. Then I did something that I'm not proud of. I went to work, and I didn't tell anyone. I showed up for my desk duty, said the right things about resting up and ready to be back on SAR when you need me. I filed reports. I answered a couple tourist emails about trail conditions. I refilled the stupid brochure rack with the smiling family on the cover who don't know there's a man in a jacket standing behind their bridge shot. Every so often, my mind would drift back to the 2:15 frame. The way he occupied my room like he'd always belonged there. The way my body in the bed never stirred. Tom caught me staring at nothing once. "You look rough," he said. "You actually sleeping?" "Not great," I said. "Consider taking your own advice," he said. "No caffeine after 6, no screens in bed, you know." If he'd known I was running a camera on my own sleep, he would have had a field day. You're probably wondering why I set 10 back up again that night. I am too. Curiosity, maybe. Stubbornness. That ugly part of me that would rather know how bad something is than sit in the dark imagining worse. Or maybe I was already too far down the road Hargrove went down. Once you start cataloguing the patterns, it's hard to stop. Night 3, I didn't sleep so much as pass out. When I woke up, my first thought wasn't about coffee or work or the fact that my week off backcountry was almost over. It was, I need to see what he did. The card came out with a little more resistance this time, like it didn't want to leave. Stupid thought. Plastic is plastic. But my fingers shook. I plugged it into the laptop. The file list looked the same. Timestamps marching. 1958, 2013, 2100, onward into the ugly hours. I skipped straight to 2:10. 2:10, me in bed, on my side, facing the camera this time. Eyes closed, mouth slack. A line of drool on the pillow, dignified. 2:12 same, no movement, doorway empty. 2:13, the frame didn't load right away. The progress bar hung at 90%. The fan in the laptop spun up loud. Then, all at once, it slammed into place. At first it looked like the void shot from 9, but inverted. Instead of a hole chewed out of the image, it was like a mass had been added. A dense, dark block taking up the whole center of the frame. I leaned in. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. The camera was pointing at my own face, not from across the room, not from the shelf, from inches away. The IR wash had blown everything into this high-contrast horror show. My skin was ghost white. My eyes were squeezed shut. The pores on my nose looked like craters. Whatever had moved 10 had done it gently enough that I hadn't woken up. Or I had, and I didn't remember. The block in the center wasn't the man. It was the shadow of him. The angle of it was wrong for any object in the room. It fell across my face like fingers. You know how you can tell when a hand is near your eyes, even with them closed? That's what looking at the photo felt like. My brain kept insisting I should feel something on my skin. No jacket in frame, no cap. Just that unnatural shape cutting the IR in a way nothing solid should. The timestamp said 0213, like it always does. There were no more images after that. The last one 10 took was my face, from too close, with something between me and the lens. I checked the physical camera then. The shelf, the wall. There were faint scuff marks on the paint, about shoulder height, like something had leaned there. Not enough to prove anything, just enough to make my stomach turn. I haven't used 10 since. I took the batteries out, wiped it down, put it in the back of my closet under an old pack and a pair of boots with blown seams. I still know it's there. Some nights, when the wind hits the building right and the walls creak, I swear I hear the barely audible click its shutter makes. Daniels gave me back my backcountry shifts eventually, said the rest had done me good, said I looked more grounded. I nodded, signed the papers, took my radio and my keys. I stopped telling them about the man in the jacket. It's not that I've stopped seeing him. I just stopped saying it out loud. He's there, in the corners of the images, in the background of new trail photos tourists post and tag the park in the training folders Mia updates. Sometimes he's further away, sometimes closer. I see him in the feed from the front door cam to the station, standing just off frame behind a maintenance truck. I see him in a blurry deputy dashcam shot of a bear crossing the road, listening from the tree line. I saw him once in the reflection on the glass of a vending machine, behind my own distorted face. Same jacket, same cap, same sideways posture, listening to something I can't hear. I still haven't seen him in person. Not really. If I pass him on a trail someday, if he's ever just a man, close enough for me to grab by the arm and say, "What the hell are you?" I don't think I'll recognize him. He doesn't live in the world the way we do. He lives in images, in lenses, in that space between a sensor and whatever it thinks it's seeing. That's why I'm telling you all this. Not because I think you can fix it. Not because I want sympathy, or a diagnosis, or some Reddit thread picking apart my choices. I'm telling you because you're probably sitting in front of a camera right now. Phone on the desk, laptop open, TV on the wall, little black dots in every direction, quietly staring. Go ahead, without moving your head, just notice how many lenses are pointed somewhere your body can be. He doesn't need the woods. He doesn't need park equipment or backcountry bunks. Those are just where I met him. Trail cams, security cams, baby monitors, doorbells, webcams. They're all the same to him. Little doors, little ears. I don't know why he stands where he stands. I don't know why he listens. I don't know if he's connected to the missing people, or if we only ever notice him when something is already wrong. I just know this. Once you notice him, he notices you back. And the next time you go back through your photos, some hike, some party, some night in your living room, if you see a man in a plain brown jacket, standing just at the edge of the frame, hands at his sides, head turned like he's listening to something you can't hear, don't zoom in. You don't want to see how close he is now.